Yep.
Awesome. So we're going to be talking about today improving the regulatory oversight and transparency in the supply chain through Unilever and its partners, and we will be acting and representing Unilever. So the problem that we seek to address is how to empower the consumer end of the supply chain to make sustainable choices on palm oil derived products. The solution that we're going to start with is implementing a QR code system on the Unilever palm oil products to bring transparency to the consumer end of the supply chain. And we're going to use the partnerships technology that Unilever has to provide readable and digestible information to the consumer. And another thing to note is that the consumer's awareness impact. Consumers are more willing to buy products that are sustainably sourced in multiple regions throughout the globe, and the consumers can make a choice, change the market. So this is just a bit of background overview that we will discuss very briefly, but Unilever is an Anglo-Dutch multinational consumer goods company with over 400 brands represented. It's in 190 countries. They are fully committed, stating on their website, to sustainable palm oil production, and they're working towards deforestation-free supply chain by 2023. And they do have partnership with Orbital Insight, which is a geospatial tech and analytics company that uses machine learning artificial intelligence to analyze satellite imagery. And they also have a partnership with the WWF as well. And a little bit more on these partnerships is the WWF's specific program that they work with is the Saba Landscapes program in Borneo. And this was established January earlier this year. And they also work with Orbital Insights to provide deforestation tracking on the preserves and land as well in Borneo. And with the WWF, they also work with the Roundtable of Sustainable Palm Oil, the RSPO, which provides framework and regulations as well. This is a quick also bit background of technology that Orbital Insight uses. So through their satellite imagery, they are able to map land usage and identify which areas of land have deep preservation lands, there are protected lands or unprotected lands. And we will be using this technology in the hopes of providing readable and digestible information to the consumers. And this is a quick background as well before we get into the implementation of our product. The palm oil market is an extremely large market, and in 2020, it constituted around almost $62 billion in total revenue. And Unilever operates mainly home goods and food and beverage products. This market of the palm oil industry represents almost like 50 to 60% of the actual palm oil industry. So our proposed plan of action is to implement QR codes onto existing palm oil products that Unilever does under its production. And when a consumer scans this QR code, they will be presented to a website that has mapping data on like the deforestation of Borneo that Orbital Insights Technologies will provide, as well as a donation link to the WWF's Shaba program. And below on the right, you can see this is some of the popular Unilever products that do contain palm oil, and it houses a lot of products in their warehouse. And another thing to note is that we have decided to implement the QR code process into the USA market because of the $11 billion or of the $60.5 billion global revenue in 2020, $11.2 billion of revenue came from the United States market. And this had increased about $1 billion since the year prior.
So moving on to why consumers would even want to scan a QR code. Since the COVID-19 pandemic, QR codes have been more frequent in our everyday life. We see them on menus. People know what they are and how to access them. There's no longer a requirement of an app to access a QR code. You can use your smartphone camera. And the consumers are also familiar with using QR codes to unlock discounts, which may make them more receptive to wanting to scan QR codes in the future. So above, we've created a prototype of what a website might look like when you scan the QR code. There would be easy to read mapping data from Orbital Insights to show deforestation, a way to donate to the Saba Foundation, and just some easy readable text on what's going on, what's sustainable, what's not sustainable, and the overall problem with the industry. We also have 2 prototypes on the bottom that show the scannable QR code next to the Unilever logo. So consumer behavior can shift the market. 88% of consumers will be prompted to boycott a brand for irresponsible business actions. Unilever is empowering the consumer. They're giving them information on what is on what's sustainable and what is not sustainable. And by doing so, the consumer will make informed choices. Ethical food and drink sees a 9.7 growth as conventional foods struggle. And 87% of Americans will buy products with social and environmental benefit. So overall, what we're hoping is that the supply and demand will shift as consumers want to buy from more sustainably sourced palm oil products, putting pressures on more sustainability in Borneo as a whole.
So another thing that's, is a question that we addressed is the consumer awareness aspect. So as Madeleine stated in the previous slide, the percentages are very high of consumers' willingness to purchase sustainably sourced products. And another thing that we found throughout surveys is that 21% would actively choose brands if they made their sustainability credentials clearer. And we also found a study that even outside the United States, countries such as the United Kingdom, India, Brazil, and Turkey had same levels of awareness, like high interest in awareness. So going into a 1-year cycle for the United States, its growth trajectory would show that it would also be able to be implemented in more global countries.
So for implementation cost and timeline, implementing a QR code is extremely cheap. It would only be around 3 cents extra per package, which is well below their total marketing and package costs that are in the multiple millions of dollars. We would see a 3 to 6 month timeline for packaging to be rolled out and web page to be developed. In the remaining 6 months of the year, we would track user engagement on the web page and QR code to see how it was performing. A portion of the leftover budget money could be used to ensure data security and privacy of the users accessing the website. Another portion of the marketing money that would not be used could go towards implementing a small discount on Unilever products that users would unlock when they scan the QR code. So in improving regulatory oversight and transparency, we're implementing transparency at the consumer level. We want them to know what's going on in Borneo. We want them to know what's going on in the supply chain and the problems with deforestation and protected land. And we're doing this by giving Orbital Insights GIS technology a large platform and a large following. And we're also giving the WWF donation aspect a large platform, since Unilever products are seen in grocery stores around the US and all types of stores. So in terms of fiscal pragmatism, the benefits far exceed the costs. There's very small costs with just basically the repackaging as compared to the outcomes, which is good PR, WWF money, and marketing for Orbital Insights. The project is extremely low cost, and it has the accessibility to reach over 11 million households, which are the amount of households that are forecasted to access QR codes for 2020.
And looking at the sustainability and local context downstream benefits, by specifically this project focusing on the end part of the supply chain with the consumers and increasing their awareness of the process involved in the sourcing and plantations part of palm oil, we would be able to provide sustainable projections outside the 1-year mark to global companies, as well as other products within the Unilever system. Another thing that we considered is because of the Unilever's relationship to the WWF and the connection that they have to the Shabazz Program Foundation, the donations made through the WWF would directly benefit the local communities on the sustainably sourced plantations. And this would allow for the end part of the supply chain to increase transparency, as well as connect the end part of the supply chain to the local communities in the WWF. And we see that the Unilever process or the QR code process being a very economic system to be implemented into Unilever. And that's our 10-minute presentation.
Thank you. Judges, your questions.
So I guess, unless there's do you have a burning question, Rob or Laura? I can start with one, but.
There, you go first.
And of course, now it's slipping from my mind. No, my question for you is that palm oil is not typically a product highlighted within consumer goods, right? It's actually kind of hidden. It's an oil. It's not something, it's not chocolate or coffee. So how do you think, and it's one of many things, how do you, think you're going to try to balance that or get people engaged in that, in looking into that, when potentially a company maybe doesn't really even want to highlight that they're using palm oil?
Right, so specifically with Unilever, one of the very interesting facts about them is since they're so committed to the palm oil industry and issues, they do list any product that contains even compounds created with palm oil or that stem from palm oil. So they do have the ability and infrastructure to kind of put a QR code on any product that contains any traces of palm oil. And hopefully doing this and people scanning the QR codes, people will begin to realize just the sheer number and amount of products in everyday life where palm oil is used. It falls under so many names and so many products. It's in ice cream, it's in soap. So the QR code could just be a really easy way for people to realize how often palm oil is used in their lives.
Yeah, one of the things that when we were conducting our research is we found a list of compounds that palm oil is part of, and it ranged from stuff named palm oil all the way to stuff named like glycerol acid or something like that. But Unilever is very unique in a company in that they know exactly the whole compound that palm oil is made of, and they have full oversight of any of the packaging of all their products. So they would have that information to be implemented onto their products.
Thank you. Rob, do you want to speak? If you want to unmute yourselves, judges, when you want to speak, I'll try to moderate.
Okay. Thank you both for this presentation, a very excellent presentation. Could you go back to the slide that shows the orbital insight data? I just wanted to get a better sense of what data they were sharing and how that kind of links to deforestation and palm oil and sustainability.
Yeah, exactly. So currently a lot of the orbital insights and Unilever information is kept private. So the graphs that we were able to find, such as this one, as well as this one right here, basically show and they track the different plantations because of palm oil's uniqueness to crop rotations. We looked at their lifespans about like 25 years. And what Orbital Insights is trying to do is track over time how these plantations are developing and which ones are happening in a sustainable manner, which ones aren't. So Unilever and Orbital Insights would be partnered to provide information on a public level that would be aware of the sustainable measures and the unsustainable measures. So when a consumer is presented with the information, it would be readable and digestible to them. So they would be able to see Unilever is getting their sourced palm oil from like the outlined bands in yellow. But if they showed the portions in red that were not on non-sustainable matters, the consumer would be aware that a large percentage of the actual palm oil industry and the landscape usage is not coming from sustainable measures.
And just to expand off of that, so Unilever right now just publishes the types of data that they get from Orbital Insight in a large sense. It doesn't really share a lot of imagery, but they do share that they also get satellite technology imagery of deforestation charts and other type of imagery that's clear to the user that we can make public and make digestible.
Thank you.
Laura?
Okay, I had two questions. The first is following up on Rob's or related. Not all of the palm oil that goes into the supply chain for Unilever is from this place, right? A lot of it's a mixed feedstock, for example. So how are you going to deal with the fact that a lot of this palm oil is coming from lots of places, getting mixed and then going into the products? It's not a single source necessarily. So that's thing one in terms of what your tool really does for the transparency and sustainability. And the second thing is about your choice to start with the US market. It seems like starting with the largest market might be a bit of a challenge versus one of the smaller markets for Unilever to test. Can you explain a little bit more about your decision behind starting so big with this rollout?
Yeah, we wanted to use the US market share specifically because of the strongest level of commitment that they have towards sustainable products, as well as the implementation of other technologies in the United States that would allow the QR code system to be analyzed, and also because of Orbital Insight's headquarters in the United States. It is possible that this could be rolled out in the United Kingdom first and be conducted on a smaller scale, but we wanted to try to implement this into the United States because they are a large share of the market and because the data available is extremely large. And to the second point, which could you remind me of the second point?
That palm oil is often mixed when it is going into these consumer products and from multiple sources.
Yeah.
One of the interesting things about that is Unilever's partnership with Orbital Insight does a lot of specific focus on Borneo. All of their satellite imagery in terms of palm oil that they get from Orbital Insight all comes from Borneo, and they just do a lot of activism in terms of palm oil that comes out of that region, and that's one of kind of the missions of their company right now, is to kind of help make the palm oil coming out of that region more sustainable. So I think in terms of kind of how to deal with it coming from different sources, is just really the data that users are going to be seeing is specifically from Orbital Insight is specifically coming from Borneo. Yeah,
and because this case dealt with Borneo, we were dealing specifically with Borneo, but beyond the scope of Borneo, Orbital Insights also has the ability to map and track data in other parts of Southeast Asia or other parts where palm oil is made. And it's very accessible for them to do that. And Unilever, outside maybe a commitment that they have to Borneo and the WWF, can also expand on the locations where palm oil is produced.
Okay, I think that is all the time we have for questions. That's up to, so Giselle.
Yes, so
Unless there's one last burning question from my fellow judges.
I think that was all the time we have for questions. Thank you to the team, and so the judges now have 5 minutes to